Hey, what's going on, everybody? I think I'm live. I think my audio works. Uh, Everything should be good to go. If it's not, actually, let me know in the live chat how my audio is. Let me pop that bad boy out so I can keep track of it. I want to appreciate everybody for coming out. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Appreciate it very much. And go ahead and retweet this out to anybody that you think would be interested, or share on Facebook, Instagram, chat box on the iPhone, whatever you guys are doing these days. Let's see. Okay, I think everything is good. All right, so today we're going to talk about the book of Daniel, and I wanted to do this AMA because I've reached 8,000 subscribers. I don't know what my exact count is, but it's over 1,000, so that's great. I hit the 1,000 mark threshold yesterday, and I'm just so grateful to everybody who has subscribed. It's been a long time coming. It's taken us a while to get here, but we're here now, and I appreciate everybody who stuck with me. Let's see. See, Trevor Lund says, since Pine Points won't apply, how many majors MENA do I get? You get maybe some mustache MENA, or some, was it some stash coins, some kind of cryptocurrency. Last person here gets points. Let's see. Milwaukee Atheist says, I'm here for the sexy mustache man. Okay, well, just wait. I'm sure he'll be around. Let's see. Lord Bryant, good to see you too, bro. Appreciate you coming. Hi, Josiah Hansen, JB, Brandon Worrell. Let's see. Okay, so any questions, drop them in the live chat. Tag me at Jim Majors, and I will answer it. Whatever questions you have about the book of Daniel. JB has a question. He says, can you explain why Daniel is the oldest book of the Old Testament? And he's totally trolling. Daniel's most certainly not the oldest book of the New Testament. In fact, it is the latest book in the New Testament to be compiled. Oh, Spartan Theology. Nope, totally not ignoring you, my brother. I appreciate you coming. Thanks for being here. You said just let's see. Josiah, can I have my own lion's den like Daniel? Promise I'll be good. I don't see any reason why not. I'm not in the position to make one or put you in one. Don't have any lions, so it's a bit depressing. I was really expecting more people to have questions. I only have 4 people in here. It seems like everybody just popped in and then dipped. Well, this is going to be great. Have I defended my dissertation yet? So I have. It's submitted to review for the first time. I got it back with revisions that need to be made, and I have just submitted my revisions. So with high hopes, I will be graduating this summer. Thanks for asking. I appreciate that. I know SJ has questions. SJ, feel free to ask anything you would like about the book of Daniel, or if you want to come in, I can send you a link. Matter of fact, if anybody wants to come in, I'll send him a link since we don't have that many questions. Did Daniel have any weed in the lion's den? It's possible. It's possible. But I doubt it. Thank you, not Tristan, for congratulating me on my 1K and that I am awesome. I know you're not congratulating me on being awesome, but because that's not my doing. That's all your guys doing. But thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Spartan Theology, don't have a specific question. Oh, come now. I'm sure you do. I am sure you have questions. Or any sort of rebuttal against any arguments that I make, or maybe you just have some opinions of your own that you would like to just kind of throw out there and test. Why do Christians think Daniel was so prophetic? Hey, Maynard Saves, thank you so much for coming. Um, well, so he was seen as a prophet, just he was not written late enough uh, to be in the prophets for the at least for the Hebrews. But the reason that they think that it's prophetic is because early on you have it's the character of apocalyptic literature. You have them applying it to their current situation. So to the Christians, this coming this coming Messiah, this coming anointed one, is, well, one of them is supposed to be Jesus. Yes, the four kings are. SJ asks. Oh, okay. Let's start with Spartan theology. Sorry, I missed that one. Uh, Spartan theology asks, "What do you think is the best argument for an early date?" Um, there are a lot of arguments for an early date. I would say that it is a more of a collaborative argument than anything. Let's see. Let me see if I can think of any one thing that would put the best one argument for a late date was. I would say the fact that Daniel gets events right up to a certain point. And after that, he doesn't. By and large, everybody agrees up to a certain point. Even early Christians, Josephus, patristic fathers, they believe that that Antiochus is the one being talked about up to a certain point. And then whenever he starts getting it wrong, then that's when the early Christian interpreters say, oh, well, then he must have been talking about something else. Well, and the Jews do it too. It's not fair to say it's just the Christians. Let's see. SJ asks, what are the four kingdoms in Daniel? Do you asking if I stick to the what do you mean by traditional view? Because that's the if you mean traditional view as in how it was originally interpreted, it wasn't Babylon and then Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. It was actually originally it was Assyria, Babylon, and then Media, and then Persia. And the book of Daniel has Babylon, the Medes, the Persians, and then the Greeks. Because the Greek, it's Alexander the Great is the one who has his kingdoms divided. Hey Floyd, thank you so much for coming. Let's see. Okay, SJ has another question. That says, Josephus said sorry, it's not a question. She says, Josephus said the Jews showed Daniel to Alexander the Great, 332 BC. That makes 165 dating problematic. One of many things. It only makes it problematic if it's true. But for some reason, we have no other Jewish source that mentions Alexander the Great. We have no other Greek source that mentions Alexander the Great doing this, or even going to Jerusalem at all. In fact, on the way to Egypt, there's no reason why he would have moved away from his coastal route just for Jerusalem. Argument from silence. I mean, you can say that it's an argument from silence, but I think it's a very strong argument because you have many contemporaries of Alexander the Great who are writing about him and about his endeavors. You have them talk about how Jerusalem was under his rule, but there's no mention of any siege or any attempt to siege or anything like that. There's no mention of him seeing the book of Daniel or seeing himself in this, and we would expect that because Alexander the Great, he really liked to hear about himself. He really liked to see other people envision him as a deity. So it's certainly something that would have been mentioned. But also, there would have been no reason for him to go to Jerusalem if they had surrendered. Um, I mean, it doesn't make sense. Well, yeah, it's because they willfully surrendered. They gave up their city. They opened up the city gates and they let them take over. It's only the people who resisted, or the people who later rebelled and rose up against him, who were invaded and who were sieged and who who we really paid attention to. But by and large, Alexander the Great is after the Persians. He has no beef with Jerusalem. Let's see. Spartan Theology asks, do you think if you became a Christian again, say you had a religious experience, would you change your mind on the date, or is the evidence not there at all? Oh no. So my opinion on the date has nothing to do with my beliefs regarding God. I held to a 2nd century BCE dating while I was a Christian. So I mean, it's not about being an atheist or being a Christian. There are many Christians. Golden Gate, John Golden Gate is a Christian, and he holds to a 2nd century BCE date. I mean, it's just the evidence isn't there for the people who study it. Assyrians were soundly defeated by the Babylonians in 609 BC. Okay. Let's see. Oh, sorry. I don't mean to be buffering, guys. Let me see if I can fix that. Please let me know if that's better, guys. Floyd FP says, do you know if critical scholars still hold that Greek loanwords for musical instruments in Daniel 3, 5, and 7, 10, and 15 is used for evidence for late dating? So yes and no. The presence of Greek loanwords themselves is not a good enough argument to say, okay, then this must be a late date, because Hellenization, was something that occurred fairly early on, or not Hellenism, but Hellenistic influences. They traded with the Greeks. They had interactions with them, so certainly they would have some sort of an influence. But what we wouldn't expect is for them to have the musical instruments being referred to using Greek loanwords, because they weren't Greek instruments, especially at this time. And in Babylonian court is where the musical instruments were played. They wouldn't have used Greek loanwords part of the Greek musical instruments. Spartan Theology says, I'm fine with the 2nd century date. I just thought it would help for people to hear that. Okay, yeah. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's a really good point. Maynard Saves asks, he says, when do scholars think Daniel was written? So scholars believe that Daniel was written in the 2nd century during the time of Antiochus, for a variety of reasons. But the main reason is because it seems to be mentioning Antiochus. All of these prophecies, they come to a point, and that point is this desolation of the temple, which was caused by Antiochus. And we see other references to Antiochus too, talking about making a covenant with the many, and in the narrative of these things going on during this period, during this Maccabean period. And they are, like I said, much more detailed. So you have a much clearer picture. But knowing history, and then knowing what Maccabees says, and then knowing what Daniel says, we can we can definitely see exactly what is going on here, exactly what they're talking about. They're talking about, like Daniel's talking about this conflict between the Ptolemaic dynasty and the Seleucid dynasty. It's and we see it all throughout the scripture. We see it in Kings and in Chronicles. Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it. If you have any questions about the book of Daniel, please feel free to drop them. Milwaukee Atheist says, Jim, how do you always look so great? I just wake up, I look in the mirror, and I think to myself, what would Lawrence do? And then I do it. Josephus said the canon was closed during Artaxerxes' reign, 5th century BCE. No, he doesn't say that. He says that the canon for the Torah was closed during Artaxerxes' reign, and it was indeed. And this is during his reign was when the Septuagint was written, not the full Septuagint, just the Torah, just the Greek version of the Torah. Maynard says, who wrote Daniel? Do you think prophetic Bible authors had access to psilocybin? Wait, so 2 questions. One, who wrote Daniel? We don't know. We know certainly that it was not somebody living in the 6th century BCE. Could it be somebody named Daniel? Sure. Do I think it was? Unlikely. Do you think prophetic Bible authors had access to psilocybin? Well, yeah. I mean, psilocybin's it's a naturally occurring compound, but I don't think that the author was using it. If that makes any sense. The purpose of apocalyptic literature, it isn't about recording, these things that you see. I mean, they could have where there's conflict and where there is a need for inspiring hope. Yeah, I mean, maybe Aaron, possibly, but I don't think so personally. I think that this is just Daniel using apocalyptic literature, using the nature of the genre to fulfill a purpose. Spartan Theology asks, does the burning bush have anything to do with DMT or ayahuasca? That's a really interesting question. I don't think it does. I think that the burning bush is it talks about this cleansing fire, and that those who are in its presence, they're either purified or they're burnt up. So I think that the burning bush is it's kind of like a metaphorical representation of who God is. This is something that's called a theophany. Whenever you see something like God coming in the smoke, or in a pillar of fire, or in a burning bush, these are called theophanies, which are appearances of God that appear to be God, but they aren't God himself, if that makes sense. So I think that the burning bush is supposed to be metaphorical of God's presence. And you see it all throughout the scripture when it talks about coming back to Zion, coming back to the holy place. Hey, Myth Vision podcast. Guys, if you don't know Derek, you guys need to go subscribe to Myth Vision. He is one kick-ass dude and one of my good best friends. And a huge reason why I was able to hit 1,000. I was lacking in about 30, 40 people, and he was able to push me over the edge. And for that, I appreciate it. Good to see you, Derek. Yeah, Aaron, even fasting can cause a surge of natural DMT, entheogens. Yeah, or you can just try smoking it, Yeah, but so I'm curious, what Aaron, do you think DMT or anything like that has to do with Daniel, or are you just talking about it? The incense burnt on altars containing cannabis. Yeah, so we do find altars. We find these libation poles, where you would make an offering, and they've got a neat uh, little resined pile of cannabis in them. I think that it was most likely used in a lot of religions. Speaking of, um, Maynard, me too, man. If anybody has any questions at all, beside just about, pardon me, the Book of Daniel, I'm happy to answer those as well, or attempt to. Pardon me. Josephus says, "It is true, our history hath been written since Artaxerxes, very particularly, but hath not been esteemed of the like authority with the former by our forefathers." Right, SJ, it's our history. It's the Torah. That's the history of the Jews, is what, Genesis and Exodus, and about their origins from Egypt and everything like that. Uh, but there's, I mean, if you look at the authoring of the Septuagint, but you can Google that right now if you'd like. Look up when the Septuagint was written, not just the Torah, but all of it. He listed books that were authority. Talk about, but it doesn't say anything about the canon being closed during this period. It says our history has been written since Artaxerxes. Hmm. Does anybody else have any questions? I'm more than happy to answer whatever I can. I'm gonna turn. Okay. Hopefully this is better. If it's not, let me know. Let's get back here. Yeah, yeah, I know. I should do more, Derek, and I need to. I'm not good at editing videos at all. And people who see my live streams know that I ramble on and on and on and on. Let's see. Would you say, oh wait, I got two of them popped up. Hath not been esteemed does not equal the closing of the canon. Uh, I'm serious. Just it's a simple Google. Look up when the Septuagint was authored, and it's just the Torah under the reign of Artaxerxes. If the canon was completed, then why wasn't the entire Old Testament uh, translated into Greek? It doesn't make sense for Artaxerxes to command that it be written in Greek, and for them, I'm sorry, not Artaxerxes, told me to, and them not do it. It doesn't make sense. Um, Yep, Floyd FP is correct. The Jewish authorities put Daniel in the writings and not the prophets. I don't know about it. I wouldn't say that it was because that it was late, but I would say because it had too many Hellenistic allusions to it, right? So they wanted a Jewish Bible. They wanted a Jewish Tanakh, a Jewish Hebrew Bible. So they largely rejected books that had a Hellenistic slant to it. It's one of the reasons that they didn't include the Maccabees. Who were the contemporaries of Alexander the Great that you referenced earlier, Jim Majors? So you have like Callisthenes. What's his name? Rufus. Gosh, I'm trying to think of the other ones. Nearchus, Ptolemy, Aristobulus. I mean, there were so many authors, so many historians that wrote about Alexander the Great. It's not even funny. Floyd FP says, would you say that Daniel never mentioned Nabonidus because the Old Testament never mentioned him and he thought the Medes had to defeat Nebuchadnezzar because Isaiah 13 prophesied it? The Medes had to defeat Nebuchadnezzar. Oh, you mean invade Babylon? Yes. Well, and not just that, but Jeremiah. So he doesn't mention Nabonidus, but he seems to conflate and confuse Nabonidus for Nebuchadnezzar. And he also doesn't he also doesn't know who his father is. He thinks that that Belshazzar is the son of Nebuchadnezzar, and says that Belshazzar is the one that that was the king of Babylon whenever it exchanged hands, and that's not true. Which is another great reason, Spartan, you were asking about evidence for late 2nd century dating. Just one piece of evidence, and that would be probably my second choice, would be to point out the fact that he doesn't know who the king of Babylon was when it fell, or who it fell to. So an event that he was supposed to be there for. Same thing that he doesn't know who was the king of Jerusalem whenever it was sieged for the first time. Let's see. Jim, can you explain the problems between scholars and theists about the Book of Daniel? Sure. So I can't speak for all of them, but by and large, the problem seems to lie in theists who believe, they believe theologically. It's their theological position that the Book of Daniel alludes to Jesus, and that the Book of Daniel is crucial for revelation, and it's crucial to be something that is true and factual, because Jesus seems to be referencing it. So therefore, Jesus must be telling the truth. And so that's a huge problem. It's really hard for a Christian. It was really hard for me as a Christian to concede that Daniel didn't write this, and for me, I reconciled with it like this. I said, look, Jesus has a human nature. Therefore, this was a flaw of Jesus' nature. It's not a sin. Jesus didn't sin by doing this. It was simply his human nature that he didn't understand this. And that's the way that I rationalized it. SJ says, so why do people date events based on Josephus's reckoning. Who do you mean by people? A lot of people use Josephus because Josephus was one of the only historians at the time, certainly one of the only Jewish historians. So I mean, it stands to reason that people wanting to know history who didn't have access to these primary sources that Josephus uses, or secondary sources to the sources that Josephus is using, they would go to Josephus. For example, if you want to know what a word means, you don't go to Latin America and find the oldest person you can and ask them what the root of this word is. You go and get a dictionary because they've already done the work for you. Is there any evidence from ancient Babylon of any of the events in Daniel? Any of the events? Events. No. Well, I'm sorry. I take that back. There were exiles that went from Jerusalem, or that came from Jerusalem, that were in Babylon. As far as being court members, possibly, because ideally, whenever they would invade and they would exile people, they would take people that they envisioned as being future assimilations or assimilators into their religion, into their culture. So they wanted prime stock. They wanted the best looking, the strongest, the smartest, the richest. And so they would focus on royalty and nobility. So they would pick those people first. So it's possible that Floyd, I agree with Spartan. There are many theists who can accept the late date. Although I will say that it's not the majority. Certainly not the majority. SJ says Belshazzar called Daniel his father in 513. The word they use could be grandfather, great grandfather, etc. Yes, it absolutely can. But Nebuchadnezzar was not his grandfather or great grandfather or etc. What evidence do you have that he was writing to impress the Romans? Whenever he predicts that Vespasian is the Messiah, I mean, he was long before he was writing these things, he was a commander for the Romans. He was under Roman rule. If he was in danger of being killed if he said anything. Well, I mean, if he upset them enough, he's not. It's the history of the Jews. It's not the history to the Jews. Yeah, I agree, Floyd. Saying that he really means grandfather is totally ad hoc, and it doesn't even solve the problem, because then you have to show that he is in fact his grandfather or great grandfather, and he's not. Saying Josephus was stretching the truth is totally ad hoc. No, it's not, because we have plenty of evidence of these ad hoc instances of Josephus elsewhere. For example, he talks about Vespasian being the Messiah. Do you think that that's true? Do you think that Vespasian was the Messiah? Because if you do, that's fine. But if you dismiss it, then you're being hypocritical. Then you're just picking and choosing what you want to dismiss. Of course, we have the Cyrus cylinder and Nabonidus cylinder. Okay, how does that solve anything? Hannah Anderson says, "Hello, Jim, the Stash Majors and fans. Hi, thank you so much for coming." Jonathan Sheffield says, "I love what you did with your design. Thanks, man. I mean, this isn't really anything. I actually have light coming through my window, so my green screen's illuminated. Thanks so much, Hannah. Yeah, so for those who are just joining, I just went over the edge of 1,000 subscribers. It's taken so freaking long. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and I would greatly appreciate it. Ex-Christian Aaron says, I keep wanting to say ex-gen. Says, is the main reason for pushing an earlier date to keep the supposed prophecies? I wouldn't even say that's it, because it's really hard to make these prophecies point to Jesus. I would say that it's more of the fact that the New Testament alludes to Daniel being a prophet. I would say that's probably the bigger reason. That and the interpretation of the fourth kingdom being Rome, perhaps, or the coming kingdom of God. I mean, whatever it is, it's because they find it authoritative, and then I think that the rationalizations for the internal claims is secondary to that. Did Josephus make modifications of the biblical narrative or not? Yes or no? If yes, why do you think he did that? Yes, he absolutely did. He did that to appease the Romans. SJ says, Belshazzar is Nebuchadnezzar's grandson through Nitocris. No, he is not. He absolutely is not. That's not true at all. I don't even know where you get that. Please post your source. Okay, SJ is saying Josephus is saying he thought Vespasian was the Messiah. Okay, well, then I could just say that he thought that Alexander the Great read the book of Daniel. I mean, okay. Thanks, Atheism, actually. Good to see you. Thank you again, Aaron. I appreciate it. Ironic coming from the guy who calls Josephus an apologist rather than a historian. Well, Josephus wasn't a historian in the modern sense. If you're viewing the work of being a historian through a modern lens, then it's really easy to say that he was an apologist. But he certainly does not meet the standards of modern historians. Hey, Alias, fake name. Yes, he was subscriber number 2. That is so awesome. Appreciate it, man. Thank you for being here. And thank you for staying here. I appreciate it. Much appreciated. Yeah, Hannah Anderson's right. Please be patient with the live stream. It's not dial up, but it might as well be dial up. Floyd of Peace. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, Matt Clark, another cool dude. What's up, man? Long time no see. Love you, miss you. Thanks for coming. Hey, Maya, I did not see you there. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it. If anybody has any other questions about the Book of Daniel, please feel free to just drop them down below. I'm going to go for about an hour, maybe longer. Just kind of depends on what happens. So if anybody would like to join, just give me a thumbs up, and I will send you a link. SJ, feel free to join. Okay, Lord Bryant asks, do you think it's tougher for some theists to accept a more later date due to a salvation issue? No, not directly anyways. Maybe maybe it's a salvatory issue in that they think that Jesus believed it. So if Jesus believed it and he's wrong, then I can't be saved or something like that. But it's not I wouldn't say that it's directly linked. Because I mean, the book of Daniel doesn't really have anything to do with salvation, in the sense that it cleanses sin or whatever. This was a way for them to rationalize them still being under foreign rule whenever Jeremiah said that after 70 years that they were going to be able to rule themselves, and that Jerusalem would be restored, and that everything would go back to the way it was. But for hundreds of years, the Jews just kept being passed from one ruler to another, being stuck in between, warring nations. So they were frustrated, and they were trying to rationalize what's going on. Why is this still happening? Why are we not being saved? Not spiritually saved, but physically saved. Oh my, I'm so sorry. I didn't know that you're only here for half an hour. And I'm glad you like my streams. I'm always worried that people aren't going to like my streams because I have a speech disorder and it makes me and ah a lot, and like right now my brain can't come up with the words fast enough, or it can't slow enough from my mouth, and I end up forgetting what I'm saying halfway through it. So it's really hard for me to formulate my thoughts. Yeah, I'm worried that people will be annoyed by that. And I tend to ramble. I don't know if that's part of my speech disorders. My speech disorder is like largely neurological, but I think that it definitely annoys people that I go down these rabbit holes and can't stay on topic. Hannah Anderson, thank you so much. And yeah, if you haven't hit the like button yet, do it or I'll throat punch you. Thanks. Love you. The Majors Show. Maya. Oh wait, where'd it go? SJ asks, why did the early church fathers consider Porphyry a heretic and toss out his 3rd century AD ramblings? Because he was considered a heretic. He wasn't Christian at all. He wasn't even Jewish. And in the 3rd century, everything that didn't line up with their beliefs was burned. That includes many deuterocanonical books, books like Ben Sira, books like Ecclesiastes. Well, maybe not Ecclesiastes, but things like the Genesis Apocryphon, things that didn't line up with their beliefs. So it wasn't just Porphyry; it was everybody, and they didn't just toss it out like they were ignoring it. They burned them. They destroyed these books, which is why we have no extant manuscripts of Porphyry's work. It is only extant through the writings of Christians. Lord Bryant, thanks so much again, man. I appreciate you coming. Thanks so much for stopping by. And Floyd, thank you too. I always appreciate your input everywhere I see you. And I appreciate your input here. And I really value you as a subscriber. I appreciate it. Okay, I don't agree that it's necessarily about Antiochus. Agnostic on that. Okay, well, if you don't think that it's about Antiochus, who do you think that it's about? And if you don't have another option, then you should ask yourself, why can't I accept that it's Antiochus? Is it because there's something about it that is indifferent to what somebody else says about Antiochus? Or is it because you think that it affects the prophecy? Lord Bryant, man, stop trying to swipe my people. Right, but he was the first to posit later dating at Jim Majors. I'm referring to Porphyry. How do you know that? He's the only one that's mentioned. That does not mean that he was the first. Definitely doesn't mean that he's the first. I would say that it's I don't want to say ignorant because that's kind of a strong word, but it is, or it's a narrow-minded view because you're not taking into consideration the full context of it. It's like, okay, well, how many copies do we have of Porphyry? Zero. You know, okay, well, where do we see him written at? It's like, well, Jerome, you know? It's like, okay, well, what about that? How many copies do we have of that? You know, not very many. Okay, so then what's the likelihood that we would have copies of anything else, especially knowing that all of these books were banned and destroyed? So why would we preserve more than one? Do you think the Christians just went around responding to everybody who disagreed with them? If that was the case, then you'd be saying that Porphyry was a lone Phoenician, that he was the only one of his people, which isn't true. As she says, it's about the end times Antichrist. The word Antichrist isn't anywhere in the Bible, SJ. That is a Christian concept. It's, again, you're viewing this through a Christian lens, and that's why most Christians can't accept a 2nd century BCE date, because they're looking at it through a Christian lens instead of through the lens of the author. I mean, if the book of Daniel existed outside of the Bible and somebody read it, you know, and they could make these associations with these historical events and historical figures, they wouldn't see it as prophecy, because they would see that at one point that it becomes wrong. And they wouldn't say, oh, well, then at this point, there must be like, I don't know, like a couple thousand years until like this next verse happens. No, they wouldn't do that. You only do that. You only find that happening when you're trying to post hoc rationalize something that you believe needs to happen. Yeah, Floyd P says Daniel thought the end times and the general resurrection was going to happen after the 4th kingdom. So either Greek or Rome. Daniel was wrong. That's right. What kingdom came after Rome? It wasn't God's kingdom. I mean, what about the Ottomans? I mean, man, or I mean, well, you know, it doesn't. It just doesn't make sense, because if it's coming after Rome, then again you would have to post hoc rationalize it and say, oh, well, it's 2,000 years until the stone comes from the mountain, which you don't see in the text. It's an argument from silence. As she says, we're in the fumes of Rome, and Israel is back after 1,878 years. We knew the abomination of desolation would be in the end times. Wow. What does the fumes of Rome mean? The Rome has been gone for hundreds of years. It doesn't make sense. There are Roman ruins. We refer to it as ancient Rome. You know, there's a country called Rome, but that's not Rome. Is the abomination of desolation? Yeah, it's supposed to be in the end times. The abomination of desolation, if you read First Maccabees, it tells you what the abomination of desolation was and who did it. If you read Josephus, he tells you what it was and who did it. Josephus doesn't say it's going to be in the end times, but maybe Josephus is wrong. I mean, it's possible. I mean, Josephus even notices some of these mistakes in Daniel and tries to fix them. Whenever he's looking at it and he sees in Daniel how Nebuchadnezzar, like the whole Nebuchadnezzar dating thing. He dates Nebuchadnezzar's dream to the second year after Carchemish instead of the second year of his reign, to fix the historical issue there. He says that Belshazzar is also called Nabonidus. So, I mean, and it says that Darius the Mede that wasn't his name. He was known by another name. It's like, okay, got it. Let's see. 1 John 2:18 is one of the many examples of Antichrist being in the Bible. It's not saying the Antichrist. It's talking about the spirit of the Antichrist. It means like somebody who is antithetical to Jesus. Not one person, not the Antichrist, but an Antichrist. Yeah, Floyd FP is right. The Abomination of Desolation was the statue that of Zeus that Antiochus set up. Antiochus Epiphanes. He saw himself as a deity. This was the god that he saw himself as. He erected it in the Jewish temple in the 2nd century BCE, and this is what really caused a huge problem. This was the same time that he outlawed circumcision. He outlawed obeying dietary law, resting on the Sabbath. He even went as far as to erect an altar to Zeus, to this god, over the current altar and sacrificed a pig on it, therefore rendering the temple desolate. Okay, SJ says that's your exegesis, Floyd, not mainstream Christian views. SJ, what mainstream Christians believe is irrelevant to what the book of Daniel means. It's irrelevant to the views of modern scholars. It should be irrelevant to anybody who wants to know the truth. I mean, because even if you don't believe, even if you believe that it was written in the 6th century BCE, then that even removes it even further from Christianity. So you should too, and you should view it as something separate from Christianity, just the same way that you would view something like the Epic of Gilgamesh. Antiochus, Nero, and Diocletian were certainly Antichrist. Antiochus could not have been Antichrist because Christ hadn't existed yet. Christ wouldn't exist for another 100 years, almost 200 years. So no, he couldn't have been Antichrist. That's absurd. Floyd's right. The New Testament writers thought they were in the end times as well. If you read Acts 2, whenever they receive the anointing of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost, and Peter turns to them and he says, "See, this is just like in the end of days, and men will prophesy and speak in tongues and blah blah blah." So they thought they were in the end times. All throughout the Old Testament, they think they're in the end times. It's like just wait, just wait. And Paul in the New Testament, it's like, if you don't have like sexual urges, then don't even bother getting married, because like we're gonna be out of here soon. Like don't worry about it. Like don't worry about if you're gonna be persecuted or whatever, because ours is the kingdom of heaven, and it's coming soon. It's a Catholic view too. I was raised a Catholic and can speak to its doctrine. Okay, well, if you can speak to its doctrine, can you speak to its canon? You don't accept all Catholic beliefs, just the ones that are convenient. On this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not overcome it. Rome was built on St. Peter's grave, and the Catholic Church fueled Christianity. The Catholic Church hindered Christianity for many years because nothing but Catholic was allowed. So it didn't fuel Christianity. If anything, it poured water into the fuel to make it harder to light. Jesus said no one would know when the end times would arrive. Jesus also said that there are some who stand among you here today who will not taste death until I arrive. Until it's that this generation will not pass. It's but you can't just pick both, pick one over the other, and then accept one or interpret one literally and the other one as some sort of a metaphor. He's always existed, Jim, referring to Jesus, what SJ says. But according to your Christian view, if he always existed and that was a belief that the Jews had, then we would see it in the Hebrew Bible. But we only it can only be rationalized if you operate under the assumption that the Jews are ignorant to this fact and that they're writing something else. Lord Bryant says, "Yes, I heard that. Tim O'Neill taught me the same. Yeshua was an apocalyptic preacher who thought the world was ending and Yahweh's kingdom was arriving, and we all know the rest." He certainly had these. There are people who say that he's eschatological, and I wouldn't say that, but he's certainly apocalyptic. But it's because of where he's growing up. He's growing up under foreign rule. He's growing up in hard times. The Romans are over them. It's and it had been like that for hundreds of years before. Not the Romans, of course, but the Greeks and the Persians. Okay, as she says, then he transfigured. The generation could be the same Janaea that we're in now. What does his transfiguration have anything to do with it? Because if his transfiguration was his second coming or whatever, then you would have to show where it talks about a third coming. Thanks, Matt Clark, so much. I appreciate you coming. You have a good night too, my man. As she says, hey, Jim Majors, somehow your video is putting blotches on your face. Just wanted to let you know if you want to change that. Yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out. Oh, I see it now. That's hilarious. Let's see if I can fix that. Boop. Is that better? I don't know if it is or not. Let's see. Nope, that's just okay. Hopefully that's better. I don't know. Okay. Yeah, and it says written in riddles and metaphors. Yeah, that's the nature of apocalyptic literature. He appeared with Moses and Elijah in the Transfiguration. Jesus did. Right, which would be his second coming. So he's not coming back because he doesn't mention a third coming. Maynard says, I appreciate it, man. Much love to you as well. I don't think I deserve way more subs, but I would love to have more subs. I feel like my content isn't on par with somebody who should have 1,000 subs. I feel like I definitely need to step it up or figure out how to step it up. But I appreciate it, and I appreciate you. Aaron, I look like a cyborg. It's hilarious. Okay, cool. I fixed it. Awesome. Manager says semi. Well, that's your own business. Please keep your privates to yourself. Jim's a cyborg, a cannabis eating machine. He is. I don't eat cannabis. I consume it. Is that preterism? Yes. Yes, that's preterism. There's no way to definitively point to Jesus without trying to change something. So whatever argument you make, it's going to be ad hoc. There's not a single one that isn't ad hoc. And yet I can argue for a second century dating without ad hoc argument. I can say, okay, we know that according to Babylonian and Persian records, we know who took over Babylon. We know that it wasn't a Mede, and we know that it wasn't Darius. We know that it was Cyrus. But apparently the author thinks otherwise. We also know that Nebuchadnezzar did not siege Jerusalem in 605. We know that he wasn't even king until 605, and that it wasn't until the following year that he was able to come back because his father had died right after the Battle of Carchemish, and he had to go back, and which is when he assumed the throne. We know that that Jehoiakim and Jehoiachin are mixed up in the book of Daniel. Coconut oil cannabis? Wait, is it coconut oil cannabis or cannabis coconut oil? Because coconut oil cannabis sounds delicious. uh, SJ, you accuse Floyd FP of interpreting these things super literal and wooden, and fundamentally, and yet everything else about Jesus you interpret literally as well. His rising from the tomb you believe is literal. His I mean, all of his words, you don't think that whenever he said, let the children come to me, that he didn't really mean it, or that whenever he's, I mean, it just doesn't make sense. The things that are crucial for you, for Jesus to have done, you have to interpret literally. But the things that aren't necessary for your I don't know. It just seems like there isn't any further justification for the difference in interpretation, other than it it supports and bolsters your theological position. Josiah says Lion's Den should be a strain name. Yeah. If it isn't, it should. That'd be interesting. See, look what he said to me. Let's see. It's laughable that the people reading that letter would interpret at billions of years. Your eisegesis is absurd. Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with him. They didn't think that the end was coming hundreds of years later. They believed that it was coming soon. Some of the things that you believe are prophecies about Jesus in the Old Testament, it says in there, it talks about, just holding on, the end is near, but they certainly didn't see it that way. Or didn't see it as being, thousands of years later. They saw it as something that was much more immediate. What is going on with my thing? Try something. I'm cyborging again. Dang it. What in the world? All right, I'm gonna go back just a little bit. Oh, not too much, just one. Oh, no, is it? Dang it. Right there? No? Huh. Well, shoot. Oh, I think I did it. I think that's it. Okay. I don't use broad brush logic, which means I don't have to apply one genre to a text of 66 books. Okay, I'm not asking you to. So let's just take Matthew or Luke. Either one, that both mention him coming in this generation. So if we don't interpret that literally, then how can we interpret the empty tomb literally? Because same genre, same book. We don't have to apply it to a different book. The end is near, but we must know humans have been around 100,000 years. And where'd it go? Oh, and only in the past 10,000 have we had civilization. We're still in the end times. Okay, so then we're going to be in the end times for how many more thousand years, do you think? What is the time? What is the full amount of time? Um, the early church fathers, some of them only believe that there were 5 or 6,000 years total. So by their estimate, then we should have been long gone. Janae can be applied to the generation we're currently in, Jim. No, it can't. It can only be applied that way because you're reading it, but it's not being written to us. Jesus wasn't talking to us. Jesus wasn't even talking, wasn't even dictating these words. This is something that was written after Jesus died. So it. I mean, no one knows, Jim. Well, I mean, well, I mean, what do you mean? No, nobody knows. Nobody knows what. Hey, Steven Sorensen, thank you so much, man, for your congrats. Yeah, I'm over 1,000 subs, guys, and I appreciate everybody who has subscribed. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. I mean, can you give me another place where Janaeus is used that is applied thousands of years later, or that applies to this generation? I mean, I don't think you can. Yeah, Hannah, I agree. She says all those passages should start with Jesus allegedly said. Yeah, and it's a great point because very few of the words of Jesus, which are written in Greek, contain Aramisms. In fact, they seem to be showing Jesus speaks Greek. I mean, so it's certainly once translated, and then if you're not reading in the original language, then it's twice translated, and all of those translations they rely on either written or oral traditions in between them. So we have this long thousands of years of revisions and copying and interpolations. Oh no. I'm supposed to wake up apparently. See. Okay. Lord Bryant says, what is your view on the lost books of the Bible, like Maccabees, Apocrypha, etc.? Didn't they come after the book of Revelation? No. So the Maccabees came from the same time period as Daniel. The Apocrypha, I mean, they come from all different periods of time. The book of Revelation came from the end of the 1st century CE, so a couple hundred years later. But my view on them, I wouldn't say that Maccabees is a lost book or that the Apocrypha are lost books, because while their original form is lost to us, much like all the rest of the Bible, it's not completely lost to us. We still have either fragments or we have it preserved through the writings of other people. But I think that they're great. A lot of the literature that I study, my expertise is in Danielic literature, and a lot of Danielic literature is not in the Bible. Yeah, Hannah says, exactly. Humans are noted for embellishing oral tradition. Yeah, they or oral to written works. Yeah, they absolutely are. Now, there's things like, it's really interesting because we see things like the Masoretic text. It wasn't in its final form, until centuries after we find the Hebrew and Aramaic fragments of the Book of Daniel in Qumran, or when they were in Qumran. But yet they are so extremely close to each other, over like 96, 97% accurate in comparison, like as far as textual variants go. And it's really interesting because the earliest books of Daniel, are Greek, and somehow the Hebrew and Aramaic version written later preserves the older text, like that which is found in Qumran, even down to the division between Hebrew and Aramaic. SJ asks, why wouldn't Jesus speak multiple languages? Jim Majors, he may have spoken. He certainly would have spoken Aramaic, possibly Hebrew, or at least be able to understand it. But I see no reason to say that he spoke Greek. I mean, it's possible. It's definitely possible, and he probably almost certainly understood some, just because of his trade. But I mean, I don't think that that would be the language that he would speak in. That if he was talking to his disciples, I believe that he would be speaking in Aramaic. Maynard says, why wouldn't Jesus write something, SJ? Oh, okay. Oh, well, so in SJ's defense, just because somebody could speak didn't mean that they could write. Writing was generally something that only learned people could do. Now, we do have many examples of people who aren't, professional scribes or what have you. We have like practice tablets and things like that, or practice papyri, like yeah, and where we have like really, really poor Hebrew, for example, that we can tell that it's not by somebody who's trained, that it's somebody who's learning. But I don't think that Jesus probably knew how to write. He probably knew how to maybe like tally or something like that, but that's about it. Lord Brian says, by lost, I mean they didn't, I guess, make the final cut. I guess you could say unofficial canon. So a lot of books didn't make the cut, but it doesn't mean that they were written after Revelation. First of all, you have a few different periods of canonizing. You have originally you have the Torah, and it was finalized during the reign of Artaxerxes. And then later you have the Nevi'im, which is the writing of the prophets, and then there's a shutoff date for that. And then you have the Ketuvim, which is pretty much everything else, and there's a cutoff date for that. And then there's a cutoff date for the Old Testament as a whole, for that canon. And then you have the cutoff for the New Testament canon, which seems to have been in a couple of different stages. But there's at least 4 or 5 different periods of canonizing because of what they considered to be authoritative. Well, not even authoritative, but what they considered canon, a canonical. But another problem that arises is that you have sects within these religions, sects. You didn't have much sex unless you were married, right? Because concubines weren't a thing back then, I don't think. Maybe. They probably were. And these different sects, they had different ideas of canon, different books that they held to be authoritative. For example, in Qumran, we find a crap ton copies of the Book of Jubilees. We find a crap ton copies of Enoch. We find a crap ton of copies of the Genesis Apocryphon. We find a crap ton of different pestures and different uh, just different commentary. Essenes. You have to remember the Essenes were their own little community. They were a community that had separated themselves from what they considered to be the perverse Jews, the ones who were okay with the Maccabean rulers taking the position of high priest. So they went off on their own. So they developed their own little clique, right? And then you've got the Pharisees, you've got the Sadducees, right? So you have all these different Jewish beliefs that certainly interacted and intermingled with each other. Not always friendly. The Samaritans is another example. And while they at one point were all considered Jewish, over time we see this development in between them, and we see just this one strand of what could be considered Orthodox being drawn from that, and it rising in popularity and taking over everything else. It's kind of like, how Protestantism arose from Catholicism, or how Mormonism, came from it. It was a separate group, and I'm not saying that the Orthodox Jews are the right ones, that they're the ones who are using the right text and the right canon. But the fact remains is that it became, because of the popularity, that whatever they decided was canon was canon. Like books like Enoch, books like the Maccabees, books that other Jewish sects saw as authoritative, they didn't see as authoritative. And so therefore it didn't make it into canon. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't important or authoritative or considered scripture by other communities. Thank you, SJ, so much. I appreciate you coming on. I hope you have a nice night as well. Says the Jews were known as the people of the book. Yep, the Book of Moses. That's what they were referring to, which is just the Torah. Jesus read from the book of Isaiah and could have written, but 90+% of the people didn't read. I don't think Jesus really read from the book of Isaiah. There's a good chance that he had probably heard a cantillation, and he probably knew some of Isaiah, and he could have recited it. But first of all, he would not have been able to just walk in and just pick up a scroll. That's not something that you can just do. Let's see. Okay, guys. Well, this has been going on for about an hour and 23 minutes. And man, I love you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for helping me get over 1,000 subscribers. I will definitely be doing a lot more of these. If you have any comments, please drop them down below in the comments section. I'll be happy to answer them. I'll address everybody. If you have any suggestions for future shows or different formats that you would find interesting, please drop them below. I would love some ideas, guys. And again, like, subscribe, share with your friends, and if you can, grow a mustache. Good night, guys.